Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, and today we're going to do something slightly different. We're going to do kind of a broad topic video. A broad topic, but about something specific, and that is the 1974 television show Kolchak the Night Stalker and its movies. There's a few TV movies that came out that preceded the show, before the show came out. And this show, and these movies by extension, were kind of a big part of my childhood. It's a weird thing, when you get a little bit older, you get some road behind you, you have a kid, you start getting kind of wistful about things. Nostalgia creeps in, which is an odd experience for me personally because I've never been very precious about things. Nostalgia has never been a thing that's really controlled me or driven me towards liking something just because. I've always had a little bit of a critical mind, and that goes just back to the way I was when I was a teenager in high school. And I went to, not to sound pretentious or anything, but I went to a private school for a couple years. And one of the things they kind of drove home into us, especially when it came to like literature and art and criticism, was kind of the objective viewpoint and understanding that you can like something even if it has elements that don't work. So it's always kind of this process of deconstruction. It was a big part of the educational experience where I went to school. Like, we, go through, poetry analysis and literature analysis, short story analysis, but we wouldn't be allowed to just kind of half-ass it. We really had to go in to the mud with it. We really had to get deep and dark with it, and try to find what it was saying about the human experience, which is an odd thing when you're a teenager because you don't have the life experience to kind of meet the authors of a lot of material that you're experiencing. You just don't. So it becomes more of an intellectual or academic pursuit in the same way that, like, these days you could say like older academics are kind of out of touch when they talk about the plight of the common person because, well, they just don't have anything in common with us. Their life experience is so far removed that anything that has to do with people in like my position, maybe your position, right? They just kind of don't see it. They don't understand. They don't understand the mechanisms, the lifestyle, etc. So that's a long way of saying that, like, I've never been one for nostalgia, but I had a moment the other day where kind of like time and space sort of collapsed on me. So going back to the Kolchak the Night Stalker, it was a show that I grew up watching on the Sci-Fi Channel. At some point in the 90s, they used to play reruns of Kolchak the Night Stalker pretty frequently, on a pretty regular basis. They used to be like marathons. And like I just showed you, I own the box set. I've owned this ever since it came out. Wish they would remaster it and put it on Blu-ray. And I've owned the movies. I own both of the movies on DVD from as soon as they came out. And then recently, what kind of brought Kolchak back into my life kind of was Kino Lorber, like a couple years ago, or maybe a year ago. I think it was a couple years ago. Put out these fantastic remasters of the television movies that kind of started everything. That started the series in general. So it kind of came back into my life, and we're home right now quarantining because we might have COVID, most likely have COVID. And so we're just kind of lazing about the house a lot in the past few days. And I was playing Ghost of Tsushima, the new PS4 game. My son was hanging out with me. We were sitting on like our recliner chair thing. He's falling asleep next to me. I have playing Ghost of Tsushima, and I'm watching Kolchak on my laptop. And not only was I watching Kolchak, but I don't have a disk drive on my laptop, so I had to get rips of the episodes, and also you can go find them on YouTube. But the rips had the Sci-Fi Channel logo, and they had like kind of the next on Sci-Fi, another episode of Kolchak the Night Stalker. Kolchak from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. only on Sci-Fi. Like, they had all these little things going on the screen, and it just like took me immediately like right back to a place where I had swapped places with my dad. And it was one of these really powerful moments because my dad passed away about 10 years ago. So, and he was such a huge influence on the things that I like, my tastes, my interests, the way I approach things, my dogged pragmatism. It's just not always a great thing. But yeah, I was kind of saw myself in this moment, like across space and time. It very like powerful moment in this weird way where I was sharing this with my kid while we're like hanging out on a lazy Saturday afternoon. And I was really moved by the experience. I don't know. I guess that was just, it's just all these things coming together at once. And I just wanted to share that, I guess. But that's what made me start thinking about Kolchak and how important it was. It was such a big part of my life that it was actually my internet handle since the time I was like 14. Since I was basically on the internet. So I would have been like the late 90s, early 2000s. My first email address was Kolchak related. So it's always just kind of been a mainstay. And when I was a kid, man, I was so into Kolchak. I was so into, I mean, so much so that I even had this book. So this is the Night Stalker Companion, which basically goes through the production notes and history of every episode of Kolchak, or all 20 of them, of Kolchak the Night Stalker. I just like could not get enough of this show. I couldn't get enough of the stories, the background. I'd always opined like, oh my God, it's like one of these lost gems. The guy who created the X-Files was named Chris Carter. He actually cites Kolchak the Night Stalker in the movies as being the major mode of inspiration, because the story is kind of about this everyman, kind of schlubby beat reporter, and he always comes across kind of crazy, fantastical stories, and he's always kind of trying to find the line between like what is appropriate and not appropriate. He's always fighting with his editor Vincenzo, and they're always having arguments about, the efficacy of a story and whether it's worth printing or not. And he always gets himself kind of embroiled in these like supernatural mysteries or these mysteries with mythic creatures and whatnot. And it's just a blast. And it's a blast. And a lot of what makes it work so well is Darren McGavin himself, the actor. Now, if a lot of people might not know who he is, especially nowadays, but he was kind of a character actor from the 60s, 70s, 80s. Most notably, what most people know him from, I guess, maybe not notably, is from A Christmas Story. He plays the father character. He plays the dad. And he's just kind of this really big, fun presence. And he really, really holds the show together. You like Carl Kolchak, You like following him. You want to see him get the scoop, get the story. Because there's always this line with the character, whether he's doing it just because he's kind of like a narcissistic byline chasing reporter, or if he thinks he's actually doing something good. He's always talking about, this is the news, we need to report the news. But in reality, there's this kind of duality to his character, because he is kind of an opportunist, and that's part of his thing. It's like he's interested in his own reputation just as much as anything else, right? And he's got a great look to him. He's wearing this kind of cheap seersucker suit and a pork pie hat, and he's running around awkwardly. Darren McGavin's kind of like a middle-aged guy at this point, and he's got this great gait. He's just got this great presence. And it was everything to me when I was a kid, And now even as an adult, going back, I was watching the show and I was watching the movies, and I kind of just fell in love all over again. It's such a unique piece of media and a landscape of things that were completely defined by things like the Night Stalker. It still kind of is the best of them, the best example of them. Maybe it didn't have the time to go bad, because it's got pretty much a perfect run. I mean, granted, some of the episodes may be better than others, but 20 episodes of material that is more than worth your time. And then even just where it starts with the Night Stalker. Starts in 1972 with the Night Stalker, which was co-written by Richard Matheson, who was kind of a pulp writer, sci-fi horror guy. Most famously, he wrote I Am Legend. He wrote the story for I Am Legend. But he worked in television a lot, and he worked on TV movies and whatnot. And the Night Stalker was one of those. This is back in a time where TV movies were not always awful. Another movie that comes to mind, another great TV movie, is Tobe Hooper's Salem's Lot. Specifically the TV version. There's like a almost 3 hour cut of Salem's Lot that came out on TV, and then they recut it for actual theatrical release, I think in Europe and in the United States. And that ends up being what a lot of people saw was like this really truncated kind of like 85-minute version or a 90-minute version. But there's the long version is fantastic. But anyways, back to the Night Stalker. So the Night Stalker kind of starts this whole thing where he's Vincenzo, his editor, the same guy that plays in the show. He's in Las Vegas, and there's a slew of murders of like like prostitutes and go-go dancers and whatnot, and you come to find out it is potentially a vampire. And Kolchak is just, I guess, even though he's like a cynical guy, he's not like a skeptic though. He's very cynical about the world, and he kind of has this kind of like whatever, fuck it attitude, but he's not a skeptical character, and he's willing to go where the story takes him, no matter how absurd. It's kind of like that Sherlock Holmes type of thing. Like, once you've eradicated all the plausible things, whatever's left, however implausible, is the truth. And that's kind of where Kolchak is coming from. He's kind of a detective just as much as he is a reporter. And the Night Stalker, this one right here, directed by John Llewellyn Moxey. What a name that was. That guy was pretty much just a workman-like director. Did a lot of television, did a lot of TV movies. But he gives kind of a very solid presentation here. Even kind of interesting, and some interesting for the time film techniques, some handheld work when it would go into more of stuff with the vampire. It felt like more alive. He wanted to give sort of this documentary vibe to it, whereas everything else is more, locked off cameras and shots, and you know what I'm talking about. you like movies, of course you do. So, but it's got a really interesting kind of flow to it. It really embraces the Vegas aspect of it. It uses the city and the strip really effectively, and it kind of creates this weird off-kilter Sherlock Holmesian kind of fable about a vampire in Vegas. And it does a great job with it, in my opinion. And it gets into every aspect of it as well, because it's not just like the incredulous nature of telling people, oh, there's a vampire afoot, but there's also the reality of it on a practical side, where like the local law enforcement and local government are involved, and they're all kind of against Kolchak. Even when they find out that he is right, they're still kind of against Kolchak, and they kind of blacklist him in Vegas and kick him out at the end. It's got kind of a dour ending. And it was and Kolchak is the kind of guy who just cannot catch a fucking break. He just can't catch a break. He's just one of these poor, hapless dudes who's got the story, but he can never tell anybody. And then a year later, because this was actually a very successful television movie, people really liked this at the time. And it holds up really well today, too, as well. They came out with The Night Strangler. And The Night Strangler is kind of like this, I don't even know what you'd call it, kind of this mad scientist story about this dude who's managed to keep himself alive for like 100 years. And every 21 years, he has to come out and like make a formula. And to do so, he has to kill a bunch of people to give himself another 21 years until he finds the right one that gives him everlasting life. It's a much more in line with what the show ended up being. The Night Stalker is kind of more straightforward. It's a little bit more of a serious movie, a little more of a straight drama, whereas The Night Strangler kind of introduces some more broadly entertaining stuff. It's more comedic in nature. The character and the characters that he comes across become a much bigger part of the story, and it is much more in line with what they did with the television show. Now, this one was actually directed by Dan Curtis, who was one of like kind of the co-producers, or the main producer for the television show. This was kind of his baby. Like, he wanted to direct The Night Stalker, but for whatever reason, I can't remember exactly why, like the studio just didn't have a lot of faith in him for some reason up to that point. Which, if you look at his filmography, he had done a lot of television. He seemed pretty competent. I mean, he had done a lot of big shows of the era. But for whatever reason, they wouldn't let him do The Night Stalker. But he ended up being able to finagle his way into The Night Strangler because he became really good friends with Richard Matheson. And I think Richard Matheson, using some of his clout, like kind of pushed him into that. But you see the kind of genesis of where the show would go. You see the evolution. Because it's got a bunch of like, he's got kind of like sidekick characters, not just Vincenzo, his editor, but also there's this woman that ends up kind of helping him out, helping him with his investigation. He even kind of uses her as bait at one point in the story. And she's more there for comedic relief. But she's really great. And the movie is really great as well. It's got a great gothic feel to it. It's got a great kind of like populist horror movie vibe to it that just worked really well. Sometimes it works maybe in spite of itself a little bit at times because of how overtly dark the story kind of is. The material is kind of dark, but it gives it a nice little lightness to it with the character. And again, that goes back to Darren McGavin. Darren McGavin, it was like I feel like he's like a guy that just did not get the career he deserved, because he's a wonderful character actor. And this as a vehicle for him is like such perfect. It's so perfect. It's the perfect meeting of a talent and material. And it's like one of these things. It's like, man, I wish he was Kolchak forever. I wish he had kept doing it. And then we get to the series proper. Like I said, the 20 episode series. And it's so special. And there's just, every episode is just, like, in my opinion, is just super entertaining. And always kind of fascinating. And there's a lot of fascinating twists on things. Like the very first episode, right out of the gate, he's fighting Jack the Ripper. And then they do like a zombie episode. And then they do a alien episode. They do a sequel to the Night Stalker with the vampire. They do Satan worshippers and voodoo doctors and Indian burial ground stuff. I mean, the killer ghosts. The Sentry, there's shadowy government conspiracy stuff. Like there's everything basically everything that would come to play into the X-Files comes from the Night Stalker. So it's nice that Chris Carter actually gave respect to kind of where he got the idea to do what he did. On Darren McGavin, he even kind of guest starred. I think he guest starred on 2 episodes of X-Files. One I know for sure. I'm blanking on the name right now. It's during a hurricane in Florida, and there's like a crocodile creature or something, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, he kind of plays a Kolchak, an old Kolchak-like character. I think there's even a few inside jokes about him being like an old reporter. But just going back to my own kind of experience with it, it's so much of like who I am in a weird way. So much of even my like sense of humor, my sensibilities as like a consumer, the things I like, the type of genre material that I tend to gravitate towards, kind of all stems from Kolchak the Night Stalker, all stems from my father's influence. It was a great way to grow up, watching these older yesteryear shows, because a lot of people my age just don't have, I'm 33, but they just don't have that kind of base of knowledge from their parents' generation, what they would have grown up with, and even maybe a little bit before that, because my dad was like 1968 or something like that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and or 1965 rather. So even he was kind of really young, when Kolchak was coming out. And we got to re-experience all of this stuff together through the Sci-Fi Channel. And that was the great thing about cable television back in the early 90s, like all the way up to basically like 10 years. There's from like the 1990s to the 2000s. It was all filled with reruns of all these great old shows. So I grew up with them. Like every day you come home from school and watch The Bionic Woman and The $6 Million Man. And if I was home, I'd watch, Star Trek and Lost in Space. Only the good stuff, right? It's kind of curated for me by things like TV Land and Sci-Fi Channel. But they had slots to fill, So they'd get the rights to things, anything that was kind of genre related, especially on the Sci-Fi Channel, and they would put it on, And they would put on Kolchak. Kolchak used to be on all the time. I don't know what the deal was with that. I don't know if somebody at Sci-Fi just like really loved Kolchak the Night Stalker, but it was on all the time. And for a long time, I did not actually watch the movies. I did not see the movies until I was older. It was probably my late teens. It was whenever this DVD came out. I think is probably the time that I actually got to sit down and watch the movie. There have been a few other TV movies. I think I had seen maybe The Night Strangler, maybe like parts of it on Sci-Fi Channel, and there is like a third movie that's not really a movie. It's like 2 episodes cut together to be a movie for like it was like a special presentation. I think after the show had gone off the air, maybe a few years after that, they wanted to do another Night Stalker movie, and they cut together a couple episodes and put it out as a movie. the real thing, the real tragedy of it all, I guess it just had kind of a tortured production. And Darren McGavin apparently had such a bad time on the show that he was the one who basically canceled it. I think they had an opportunity to come back for a second season, and he kind of just wasn't interested in it. I think some of the things he even says was about kind of how he felt there was not enough growth with the character. It had kind of become redundant by the end of the first season. I mean, as a fan, as somebody who watched it, like, I disagree, you know, because there's something nice about these episodic serialized things. You know, over the past few years, I've been going back and like kind of filling in some gaps. Some Star Trek I had never seen before. I never really watched much of Deep Space Nine, so I was going through that and watching X-Files, you know, when they started putting them on streaming, rewatching all the X-Files and stuff, you know, 5 or 6 years ago. And there's something kind of nice about this kind of succinct 45-minute story that isn't directly connected to anything larger. Like, so if I miss an episode, it's not a big deal. You know, I can go in, I know who these characters are, they're all kind of these archetypes, and then we can go on a little 45-minute adventure, and I get like a well-rounded experience. You know, because nowadays it's not that. Everything is a elongated miniseries. Everything kind of piles onto the next. I know every once in a while shows will go back and do some episodic versions. I think there is kind of even like maybe a desire, a hunger for that kind of stuff these days. But it was really nice the other day, just sitting there and kind of watching. I ended up watching almost the entire series in the afternoon and then watched the movies that night. And it was a great day. It was a great day. I cannot wait to kind of jump into some of the special features on these Kino Lorber discs. Kino Lorber Studio Classics. Because there's a commentary with film historian Tim Lucas, who I don't know anything about. So I'm very, very curious to see like what a film historian, like what I'm going to learn from that. Especially because I have such a wide breadth of knowledge already from just being kind of obsessed with it as a teenager. To go back and see, like, you know, what is the actual historical perspective from like a film standpoint of the legacy of the Night Stalker and the Night Strangler, and then the series as it's, you know, itself. I mean, the legacy of the series, I guess, is, and the movies, I guess, by extension, is, it's obvious, you know, if you know about the X-Files. And just because of what the X-Files inspired in media and television, all of the copycat shows and all, you know, it just gave, I guess, people a hunger for that kind of stuff in the 90s. It kind of reintroduced these things. And it all starts with the Night Stalker. Yeah. But I don't know. I guess that's all I really got to say about it. I really enjoyed revisiting them. It made me feel wistful. I got a little, I maybe have dropped a tear or two. My son sitting next to me. It was like such a weird experience because like the Sci-Fi Channel logo like was on the screen, and then the little like, we'll return with more Kolchak. Like I was just completely transported to a different part of my life, and then just to have like that powerful recognition of like how I had swapped roles. Almost felt like a weird way of like rite of passage or something. I don't know. I'm not normally affected by these kind of things in that way. But I guess, I don't know. Maybe now that I'm getting older, like I said at the beginning, you tend to value these things more. You tend to think about these things more. These moments in your life that have made you the person you are. So maybe in some weird way that is nostalgia. Now, nostalgia should never control you. It should never be some sort of weird thing where you have kind of this arrested development, this forever adolescent thing that we see going on with consumerism and pop figures and toys. And no, I'm not innocent of that stuff. Although I will say most of this stuff was given to me. Most of the toys anyways. Because when you're a nerd, people just assume, they're like, oh, I got to get Shaun something. I'll get him like a toy. Like, okay. Thank you. I've bought some of that stuff. I bought those Batman. Where is it? Yeah, those Batman toys. I bought them for my son. No, those are the Frank Miller, The Dark Knight Returns toys, and I was like, oh fuck, I'm gonna get those. They were on clearance. I would never pay full price for a fucking toy, but it seems like I'm rationalizing. But I did buy them. Yeah. If you've never seen Kolchak the Night Stalker, there's actually places you can stream the entire series. You can just go to the NBC, just their homepage or their streaming page. Maybe the free version of Peacock. I don't know. I didn't check it there. It is there. I ended up having to rip it, due to the fact that like the mixing on the streaming site was so low, I could barely hear it. So I had to go get a rip so I could put it into VLC and like crank the volume up. But it ended up working out because I got the Sci-Fi Channel logos. So good for me. Good for me, everybody. What a wonderful day. What a wonderful Saturday. The perfect Saturday. Yeah. Honestly, I can't wait to dive into some of the special features on these discs. Probably going to watch the last few episodes that I didn't watch. And reintroduced it back into my life. And I was very, very happy for that. Very happy for that. Now I'm going to go try to make everybody I know watch The Night Stalker like I did when I was a teenager. You know? I remember back in the day, because it got taken off of Sci-Fi, but Columbia House, they used to have like these things where you could get a videotape every month, like $25 a month. So I was ordering the Kolchak series. And I had all the tapes. So I had all 10 tapes, 2 episodes in each tape every month. And my friend, and a friend of the show as well, Big Paul, I used to make him watch them. I don't know if he really liked them. I can't remember, honestly. Because at the time, I was already in my mid-teens. I was like already nostalgic for Kolchak. So I used to make him watch them. We'd go to his house. I remember watching one of the tapes, and I feel like he liked them. I don't know if he definitely didn't like them as much as I did, but such is life. I wish I still had all those old tapes. I had all those old VHSs with the big black plastic clamshells. They looked like something you would have gotten from the library. They were awesome. They're rad as hell. They had a great cover too. The cover with Kolchak with a cross. Oh, I love that. I love that picture. That used to be my my little icon growing up. That was what it was for for internet stuff. I'm sure if you go look for Kolchak 1986, the year I was born, you could probably find on some message boards in some ancient digital world, you'll be able to see my old comments. Maybe don't look them up. I don't know if they'd be embarrassing or not. Although I wasn't very active, so. But it was my handle for a very long time. But anyways, everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, there's a bunch of links in the description for our Facebook, for Instagram, and my personal Twitter. Also, if you'd like to make a recommendation for these daily videos or for something for the big show, Zoobox Goes to the Movies, leave it in the comments. Make sure to check out the latest episode of Zoobox, number 44. We had a fun, interesting conversation. And also, the most recent episodes of Zoobox Goes to the Movies is we did Fight Club and Casino. Great episodes. Long, but great. Great conversations. Dan Prophet and Big Paul, the man himself. Always a great time talking to those guys. And we have learned so much about the movies that we're talking about. And it's been a blast lately. So definitely check those out. All right, everybody. You have a good one.